Welcome! This is the Rustic Songbird podcast, and I'm your host, Lydia Walker. This show is for you if you're ready to learn more about the craft of songwriting and take your skills to the next level. Thanks so much for listening. Let's get started. Hey everybody, I want you to meet my good friend Daniel Doss. He is a recording artist, songwriter, worship leader, and has been a mentor of mine for a long time. He was one of the first people to really inspire my songwriting and encourage me in that. And so I can't wait to share his knowledge and experience with you today on the show. Daniel, thank you for being a part of one of my first interviews on the new Rustic Songbird podcast. This is exciting. It's always good to be a part of something new and fresh, and I can't wait to hear what you've been up to. So welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Lydia. Such an honor to be here.
Well, let's talk about songwriting. I feel like I could talk about songwriting all day long, and there's so many different aspects to it, and both of us love worship music. And so specifically today, I wanted to talk to you about your experience with writing worship music and writing for the church and what that looks like. And our audience is songwriters that may be just getting started and are learning the craft of songwriting and wanting to improve their skills. And so that's who we're talking to today. I'd love to start by just asking you, how do you prep for a songwriting session, whether it's by yourself or with others in a co-write? What helps you to really get in the zone?
Well, usually I'll listen to some of their music. Usually I'll write with artists or like worship leaders from other churches. I'll go and listen to what they're creating these days. It kind of gets me in the vibe and the zone of what they are accustomed to writing. And so that less times that'll help, get me there. Also, I'll always try to come prepared with some ideas beforehand. Sometimes I'll be listening to somebody while on my drive in to the right, and I'll have some ideas, and I'll just kind of record those real quick. And there've been a couple times when I'll just say, hey y'all, this is very rough. I literally just sang this a few minutes ago in my car on the way here, and I'll show it to them, and they'd be like, that's it, let's go with that. So just listening to music and just kind of listening to what your target is really helps kind of get you in the vibe there.
That's awesome. So you do your research and you try to listen to different things to get inspired. And sometimes those ideas that just come to you in the car are the best ones. And I agree. It's sometimes it'll just hit you and it's just right. And so I think sometimes we think too hard about the ideas when it really is, like you said, just preparing your mind and just being open to creating something new. Songwriting is definitely a discipline. Let's talk about the discipline of songwriting, because some ideas will just come to you and you'll be inspired, but most of the time you might be staring at a blank page or, starting from scratch and just waiting for something to hit you. So with the discipline of songwriting, what methods have helped you to be consistent as a writer?
I think there are a few different things, but the main thing is committing to actually just writing, even bad stuff, and not beating yourself up over every word or line or whatever. When I moved back to Nashville area from Chicago area, I wanted to go after maybe getting a publishing deal and doing some songwriting. And so I took a sabbatical from ministry, and during that time I had a mentor tell me to just be creative. And so I went downstairs to my studio here to this place every day, and I committed to writing a song and creating a demo of that song. As bad as it would be, whether the song was bad, whether the demo was bad, that didn't really matter as much as committing to the craft of creating. One time I was writing with, you may have heard of Tony Wood. He's a legendary writer in Christian circles. And it was years ago we wrote. It was the first time we wrote. It was the only time, about 8 years ago. And now we know each other a lot better now. We've written a lot now. But 8 years ago we wrote one time. And I remember I went on the back of the door where we were writing. I closed the door and I looked at it, and there was a quote there. I don't remember the quote, but basically it said something along the lines of the great composers didn't wait for inspiration to hit them before they began writing. The great composers sat down and wrote until inspiration came.
Wow, that's
basically what you have to do. You have to commit to writing. there's one other moment I remember. I was in a co-writing session with it was at a church in Hendersonville that they brought together a bunch of writers to have a writing day, and we were in a room. I had 2 interns there, so they were young, college age, and then had the creative director was in there with us. He hadn't done a lot of co-writing, but we were all together writing a song, and it's like we got to a point where nobody was really throwing out any ideas. And I think we got to that point. It's like we were kind of at a sprint, and then we made it to a crawl, and then we were just laying flat. And nobody, I think people were not willing to be vulnerable to throw out ideas because, it seems like ideas were getting shot down by everybody. And also in our minds and our hearts, we kind of felt like we wanted to write the next Oceans. And it's like, you're not going to do that every day. And really the people that wrote Oceans didn't even know it was Oceans or be that great a song when they wrote it. I'm fairly certain of that.
Yeah, they were just writing.
I just said, hey, let's do this. Let's take off all the filters and let's just write a bunch of bad lines, okay? So if you have a cliche line in your head, write it down. We had a Google Doc open, so everybody pick a spot and just start writing. And it's almost like the spigot head was tightened because our filter was so huge. And that all of a sudden, it's like we opened all the spigots and said, let whatever fall out. And we all wrote probably 20, 30, 40 lines.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, maybe 1 or 2 of those lines became the inspiration for the next bridge or the next verse. And so, committing to the craft, sitting down and writing until something happens and something comes, and sifting through all those bad lines to get to that good one, that's kind of what you have to commit to. Don't wait till you get that one line right. Write a bunch of bad lines, find the good one. And also, I would say this, finish the song. Like, you got to finish it. You got to say, hey, I'm going to finish this song. I can come back to it. Sometimes I'll lay a song down, but sometimes I'll lay it down on purpose to come back to it later or bring it to a co-writing session as the song start. But when you're honing in on your craft, when you're working on your craft, it's important to commit to something and finish it. There are times to finish and times to let it lay, but sometimes people don't finish things enough because they're afraid of it not being as good or whatever. So anyway.
Right. So lowering your expectations really helped you to tap into the creativity and sift through those bad ideas to get to a decent idea.
Totally.
And I think sometimes we set expectations for ourselves to just write a complete song and make it a great song. But sometimes you have to write 100 good songs to get to that great song.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really good advice, is just lowering your expectations and adjusting it to not put so much pressure on yourself when you're writing, but just let it flow and sift through those ideas.
Yeah.
So are there any tips that have helped you when you're feeling stuck or like dealing with writer's block where you just can't think of any ideas?
Yeah. I'll get up and walk around. I'll just take a step back from the song, listen to some music. I will maybe chase a different idea. If there's something else, chase a different idea. I might try to change the melody up. Say, what if we try a different melody? I think stepping away helps lots of times. You take a step back, and it's actually a scientific thing I've heard that if you move around or if you change some things up. So sometimes I'll just grab a different instrument. If I'm in a writing session with some other writers, and we're kind of came to a standstill, I'll just put down my guitar and go to the keyboard, or put down the keyboard, or, lots of times when I'll just kind of take a restroom break, walk down the hallway, and while I'm walking, and half the time you come back and the other writers have worked on something and, it's
came up with it without you.
Yeah. So it's like, just change, I think is the key word. Change things up, switch things up. And if you're in a position where you have to finish a song, like in a session, then I would say change the instrument.
That's so cool. And you've co-written a lot for worship songs. So one thing that I was really interested in is how to write to connect with your audience, because when you're writing for the church, it's not necessarily just writing what you want to write or what you think sounds cool, but writing something that you think the Lord is trying to say to the church and something for them to really take to heart. So how do you communicate your ideas with the other writers to make songs for the church?
Yeah. The first piece of that is understanding what church you're writing with. I've written with a lot of different denominations. So understanding the values of that denomination and really the values of that local church, you kind of have to take some time and listen to where they are. There was one worship leader I wrote with whose pastor had just, they were struggling with some medical issues with their son, and they're walking through that, and the whole church, it was kind of consuming the church and the ministry. And we just wrote a song out of that struggle that really there were some lines that were very specific to that situation, wouldn't fit with other churches. And so, I think it's key that you understand the congregation you're writing for as far as their belief system, their doctrine. That's huge. Also, like some churches value lyric, the correctness or the biblical, the lyrics that stick really close to the Bible, or
right.
Like
they want the theology to be correct.
Yeah, I wrote with a guy from Sovereign Grace, who, the lyrics were very important. And up front, I said, my assumption here is that we want to make sure that the lyrics are thick and rich. He's like, yeah. And then I've written with, other groups that are more soaker. It's kind of a term where you just kind of, when you have the song, you have that one line that you just sing over and over, and you're just in the moment, in the spirit, they tend to value that. I've written with another group that they value simplicity. They don't want any sort of like high kind of language. So, writing with these different groups, you figure out they have different expectations and lyrics and melody types that they want to land on. And so understanding that going into the session is very important. As far as like with a congregation, knowing that you're, writing for a specific group of people and for people that aren't musicians to sing, I think it's very important that you think through the lens of, you create through the lens of, the person that doesn't sing, the person that doesn't play an instrument. Can you make it catchy or something that you want to sing, but simple without being mundane?
Right.
And so that's a big challenge in writing music for the church to sing.
Sometimes it's hard for creative people to simplify because we want it to be fancy. We want it to be like the next best thing and the greatest song we've ever written. And we put that pedestal up there. But really, like you said, sometimes it's the simplest songs that really take off and connect with people because you're able to take a basic idea and to be able to communicate that. And so just to have the humility to really take a step back and say, hey, this may not be anything more than like a 4-chord progression and just a basic verse chorus order, but this is, just the simplicity of communicating this one idea. And so I think that is really helpful because you're thinking about your audience more than, what you want to say as a writer, but you're using those skills that you have as a creative person to be able to kind of step in their shoes and see, how would somebody listen to this? Would somebody that doesn't have any of the background that I have think of it the same way, or is there a way I can say it that they can understand it better? And so I think really asking yourself those questions and being humble enough to, it's not watering it down, but like simplifying it. And like you said, not having like high and mighty language that a normal person wouldn't understand.
For sure.
I think sometimes that's the most effective.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah, I would love to hear any advice you have for someone who's just starting in their career of writing and who might not know what style they want to go into just yet, or who their audience is. How would you encourage someone to find what they're good at?
It's a good question. Sometimes it helps to get an outside source to listen to songs you've written. If you're wanting to get into writing more, then you've probably already written a lot. So I'm assuming that you probably have a bit of a catalog. Um, and so, looking at the language you use in your songs, that will determine a lot of, the style, because you're probably already writing in a particular style. But it is good to understand there are differences in the genres. Like I write worship, I write CCM, I've written some Southern gospel, and I've written just a little bit of country. But I've been in it long enough to realize, when you're in certain rooms, you're using different language. There's a Southern gospel writer I've been working with, and she, when I first started writing with her, she would like slap my wrist a little bit, be like, "No, we don't talk that way in Southern gospel and Southern," and then in worship, with a lot of these groups that do, are on the cutting edge of worship releasing stuff, they can sniff out a CCM line, that sounds like something you hear on the radio versus something that is kind of a raw worship type of confession thing, and so, what I would suggest is, apart from just writing and writing and writing and writing some more, I would say listen to a few different bands of one particular genre and look at the lyrics, the lyrical content, and also look at the melodies. Like, try to play the melodies out on the piano and see how they're shaped. Do the melodies start high with a big soaring, just one word thing, or they come in with just like a lot of words that are kind of just kind of going for? Are they really rhythmic? And look at the rhythms, look at the jumps and the melodies, and look at the the lyrical content, because there are words that in writing with who I write with, I have to be aware of words that have been used within the last 1, 2, or 3 years, because I might throw out a word and they'll be like, "No, that was like a couple years ago. Remember they did that ocean song?" Or we're not writing about water anymore. We need to stay away from that. Or let's focus on what's real, and it's like, it's really weird that you have to think about, even within that artist, they might, I was with an artist last week that I said, "Well, what about this phrase?" And they're like, "Well, I have a song that already says that." And so it's like, oh, okay, so if we're going to make it on this record, we've got to say it differently, So,
yeah, that's like naming your child. It's like the hardest thing in the world, because you want it to be unique, but you don't want it to be just, any old common name either. You want it to have good meaning. You want everybody to like it. It really is, when you're writing a song, there's a lot that goes into, especially the title, but like you said, even just a line and how it will connect with people. So it does take a lot of thought sometimes. Even if it's a great line, if it's already been used, it might be good to stay away from it.
For sure.
Well, tell me a little bit about what projects you've been working on lately and how people can connect with you online and hear your music.
Yeah. Lately, I've been producing a lady out of Florida. There's a church I'm at where they bring in different worship leaders, and she writes music, and they've been bringing in some of those worship leaders to write on that project. And so I'm helping produce the album with all the different worship leaders and stuff, and songs that are being written for that. And also been working with Christy Nordoff and Brave Worship, doing some stuff with her, and I think
she's awesome. I'm excited to hear what comes out of that collaboration.
Me too. She's such a sweet spirit, and we've written together several times, and just developed a good friendship there. And releasing a song that we wrote, I would say, in about 30 minutes.
Wow.
We hung out for about an hour just talking about things in our world, and then all of a sudden she was talking. I went to the piano and we just started singing, and about 20 minutes later we had a bunch of lines, and then 10 minutes later we had it all organized. And so that's what we're releasing, called "You Are the Bread," coming out pretty soon. So and then about a year ago I released my own project, a solo album, full length, called "Praise the King," and I toured that a little bit, and I'm still taking it different places to use some of those songs, and also pitch a lot of those songs. As a songwriter, I'm like, if another artist wants to use the songs, that's great. Had a guy take one of the songs and we rewrote the bridge. So his bridge is different than the bridge that I wrote,
Mm-hmm.
and it's on his record. And so, just trying to be open-handed with that. So, but yeah, that's what I'm working on these days, and really excited about the record I just released. It's doing well. A lot of people are getting ears on it. So, yeah.
That is so cool. And it's such a compliment for someone to want to record your song
Mm.
and to be able to tailor it towards their voice or towards their style or their message is really good. And you can always write more songs, right? So you've got plenty for you as an artist, and then pitching them to other people. Or if you write a song that might not fit your genre as an artist, pitching it to someone else is a great way to still get it out there into the world and let it do its thing and have its life somewhere else. So that's really exciting that you're working with different artists and in multiple genres too, and just putting good stuff out there. So thank you for all you do. I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing some of your experience with us as a songwriter. I do want to give out your website so anybody that's listening can check out more of your music, and that's danieldossmusic.com. You can check out more of his latest project, Praise the King, and get connected for any updates with the new releases coming out. So I'm excited to share those when they come out, and can't wait to see you soon. And I know you're in the area now, and just can't wait to see what God's going to do. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share with us today.
Thank you, Lydia. It was a blast being with you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and share it with a fellow writer. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you in the next episode.